Sales and Social in association with Xero. So my name's Christopher Goodfellow. I'm Deputy Editor of BusinessZone.co.uk and I'll be hosting the Hangout today. If you have questions, you can use the Cover It Live chat box, which is just on the right-hand or top right-hand pane of the website. So this Hangout comes at the end of a 3-month series we've been running on exactly those topics, so PR, sales and social. And we've had a number of entrepreneurs take part in a series of challenges, so getting them to do very practical things to do with their business. And we have the mentors to that campaign online with us now. So I think I'll start off just by introducing everybody. So we've got, if I say your name and then if you could give us just a few words about yourselves and what you do, that would be great. So Tamsin, if you want to kick us off.
Yes, sure. Hi, I'm Tamsin Fox-Davis. I'm with Constant Contact, so we're a digital marketing tools package for small businesses. And my role is very much the small business evangelist. So I'm sharing best practice knowledge for small businesses, for people who are really trying to get their own marketing done with a specific focus for online.
Great, and Guy, if you want to go next.
Yeah, Guy Letts from Customer Shore. I used to work for a big company and did a lot of work in customer services, and based on the value I found from customer feedback in terms of increasing revenue, improving retention, attrition, customer satisfaction, dramatically better results than any other initiative we tried for customers. On the basis of that, I set up Customer Shore as a software company to bring a tool to market to help companies get feedback for themselves.
Great, and finally we have my colleague Dan Martin. Dan, if you could just say a few words about yourself and your experience with PR.
Yep, cheers Chris. So my name's Dan Martin. I'm editor of BusinessZone.co.uk. So I've been at BusinessZone for 9 years and a bit, and previous to that I was at a couple of other small business titles. So I've been writing about small business issues for about 12 years. So although I'm here to talk about PR, I'm talking about it from the journalist perspective, so a person that receives hundreds, if not thousands, of PR approaches every week. So I'm sort of, I suppose, qualified to talk about the sort of PR that works, PR that doesn't, and how you can get your small business into the press.
Great, thanks everyone. So we had one question sort of immediately after we started, and that's from Tony Robinson from Enterprise Rockers. And he says, is DIY social media now as effective in publicizing your business news as traditional press releases distributed through a PR agency? So if Tamsin, if you want to kick off with that one, and then Dan, maybe give us the kind of editor's view on that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not a PR specialist, but the crossover between PR as it's traditionally conceived and social media and digital marketing is just increasing every single day. So I very much come at it from that standpoint. I believe that you need to use a combination of tools. I don't think that I don't think that you're going to get the very best results by just focusing on one or the other. One of the great things with digital PR, so using social media, looking at getting traction from blogs and things, for example, is that you can actually see what it's doing. It's very, very easy to analyze exactly what's going on with that, and we do see that it's making a difference. We do see data coming in from various different sources that say that consumers do act on the recommendations, on the reviews that they read, on the articles that they read from digital media.
Great, thanks Tamsin. And Dan, I know you're kind of on the end of a lot of pitches, both from PRs and being contacted directly from small businesses. I mean, what do you kind of think about the two different ways of being approached?
I completely agree with what Tamsin said. You should not be focusing on one thing, because that's just not going to work. You're going to be missing out on opportunities. But being a journalist, I suppose, for 12 years, obviously I've seen the rise of social media. So if I think my first journalism job when I was an unpaid intern, when they could do that back then, 12 years ago, and there was no social media or anything, so the PRs, the only way businesses could get to me was through your more traditional PR. But I'd highly recommend business owners, yeah, are on that on social media, because us journalists are looking for great stories constantly. And it was a, in the old days you had to speak to the PR agency and you maybe wouldn't get the full story. You want to talk to the horse's mouth, as it were. So we'll go direct onto social media to find great businesses. So if you're on social media, in a way, it's sort of leveled the playing field. So the smaller guys can actually get some big PR in the big publications just by talking directly to journalists. So I wouldn't say it's more effective because it's hard. I mean, there's bad PRs out there and great PRs, but I think it's definitely leveled the playing field for small businesses that want to get PR, in big publications.
Great. And next, guys, is there anything you wanna add there, or if there's a lag for you, is there, Guy?
Oh, sorry, I thought you said guys. That's a
Localism, yeah.
problem. Nothing to add to that excellent answer, and nothing to add to that.
Okay, thanks a lot for the first question there from Tony. We've got another one just come in from Lorraine Ullman, who's from Enterprising Child, and she asks, what is the average return on investment on paid for social media advertising, and is it worth it? So who would like to start with that one?
I'll start.
Okay.
I can say, first of all, I don't know, because it depends. So when you say average, there's industry averages, there's regional averages, there's averages depending on different channels that you're looking at as well. But I wouldn't actually worry about that, because the average doesn't matter. It's what you're getting out of it that matters. It's what's working for you that's important. And one of the best things that you can possibly do when you're looking at using social channels in order to get the word out there is actually find out where your people already are, because that's where you're going to immediately get the best impact. And if you don't already know, the easiest way to do that is to ask them. Just ask what social channels they're on, and have a little bit of a look at what people are doing on those channels, the kinds of people that you want to attract, and then that's where you start.
Great. And does anyone else want to add anything on that?
Yeah, I've had a little bit of experience of paid advertising on Twitter. So outside Business Zone, I've got a little photography startup, and we've used it to a very low level, but we've used Twitter ads and we've used Facebook ads, and they are quite effective in terms of driving traffic to your website and getting likes and on your Twitter profile, on your Facebook page. I think one of the most interesting bits about Twitter advertising is that you can target followers of other accounts. So obviously you can target the followers of your competitors. So the chances are, if customers are following your competitors, they're probably interested in your services. And I read a little case study actually this week, because I was actually writing an article on this subject, from a social events company that said they spent 20 quid on Twitter advertising, and from that they got 123 clicks on a webinar link. I think it was 10 sign-ups to the event and 3 Twitter followers. And that cost them £20. So it can, like Tamsin says, it depends what you're doing. But if you've got a very direct call to action, like sign up for an event, I think it's worth, putting a couple of quid into paid advertising and see how it works. But don't invest a load. Just sort of play around with it and see which bit works for you.
I think that's the key. I think you've got to test it, and the fact that you can try it for kind of coffee money is a really good thing. But what I have seen small businesses do is in effect waste money, because they're thinking, oh, I just need to get more likes to my Facebook page, for example. But then if that doesn't actually convert to sales, then it's not helping them. We always say that with marketing, you'll want to get a physical and measurable response out of people, and that response should be moving them closer to becoming your customer. So I think that example, Dan, is excellent, because it shows someone who's really thought that campaign out. They haven't said, oh, we'll just bung 20 quid on Twitter advertising and see what happens. They've actually thought about where they want to drive people. I think that's vital.
Great, thanks Tamsin and Dan. We actually had a question come in straight away that sort of follows on from that. And can anybody think of sort of ways that you can accurately measure ROI on PR, and whether there are any good metrics, or if not, what kind of targets you should be setting yourself on that? Dan, I don't know if you wanna kick off with that one.
Oh, I was hoping I wouldn't be first. Well, I suppose I could use the disclaimer. I'm not a PR agency, so as I said, I'm coming at it from the journalist perspective. But I suppose the old traditional way was, like column inches and all of that malarkey. But nowadays, on the mentoring call that we did for Reach for the Clouds, the CEO of a PR agency that unfortunately couldn't be with us today, he said, nowadays it's all about, Google Analytics and measurements like that are integrated into PR strategy. So you've got to, if it's online, and you get a link in the PR, is measuring, does that PR actually generate any traffic to your site? But as again, studies show that endorsement by the press just is a way of building trust in your market. So PR is a very, very hard thing to measure, and I think it always will be the sort of more traditional PR. But I think with the sort of analytics tools that are available now, if you are taking on a PR agency, they should probably be using something better than Google Analytics. They should probably be paying for something quite powerful, to show you the sort of traffic and things like that it's generating to your site.
Okay, thanks, Dan. And Guy, it might be a slightly different angle to tackle it from, but how do you kind of think about PR and customer service, and in terms of that sort of have you got any advice in how you project the right image to your customers and how you maybe build that into the way you activate your customer service?
Yeah, those very interesting comments. I've been reflecting on those because we all like to measure things, don't we? We like to know. We all want the silver bullet that's going to work better than the other thing we've been trying, and those are very hard things to do. I guess our experience on social media has the emphasis, or our lessons learned, is very much around the social side, just getting likes, clicks. If they're not from your target audience, if they're not from people who are potentially going to buy your product, I think Tamsin was absolutely right. And unless it converts into sales, not necessarily immediately, that's not going to work with PR or most forms of marketing, actually. It's about increasing awareness amongst your target audience so that when they do have the need, they think of you. And some of these things are not directly measurable in the way we want them to be. So some of it is going to come down to, as Tamsin said, testing stuff and having a subjective confidence that it is going to deliver a result for you. And if it doesn't, or if it, don't be afraid of not doing it and not spending there over the long term. Again, you'll learn something by not doing that, but it's not going to turn sales off like a tap. In terms of social and other means for customer service or how customers perceive you, the answer to this is you have to always flip things around and say, if I were imagine yourself as customer of another business and ask the same question. And do we want to, is it important to have a customer service channel on Twitter? Well, I would say it's actually really restrictive to get to deal with a problem in 160 characters or 140 characters, whatever, whether it's text or Twitter. What works really well is if you provide a really clear and easy way, whether it's a phone call or a range of ways, website, email, phone calls, if you make it clear and easy how people contact you, and when they do, whatever the channel, if your response is fast and brilliant, then it really does. The means is less important than the outcome, I would say.
Okay, thanks for that, Guy. And Tamsin, is there anything you'd add there at all?
Yeah, I think there's two things. One as a measurement tip certainly for digital PR. If you're looking at getting coverage yourself, use a link shortener and customize the links. So, for example, I do this all the time. So I will use bit.ly, bit.ly, and I will take something that I want to share, and I will use bit.ly to shorten the link to that thing. So that might be, say, a link to your website or a specific article on your website, or a product page or something like that. And then when I'm talking to the people that are going to be writing about that or covering it, that's the link that I give them, so that you can then go to bit.ly, because bit.ly checks, once you set up your free account there, it looks and it sees how many times that link has been shared, and you can tell it how many times it's been clicked on. as well. So so that's like one really simple thing. Dan's absolutely right though. If you're using a PR agency, they should cover all of that for you, and it's going to be a lot more sophisticated, but that's like a little first thing. And then I think the second thing was to come back on what Guy was saying about customer service. Absolutely right. You want to be fast and you want to be brilliant. But I think that social customer service channels are important, but the intention is not to deliver the answer necessarily on those channels, although that might be easy, because it might be, how do I find X, and you can send them a link to where that answer is. It's more just to allow people to connect with you in the way that they want to, and you can then take that into another channel. So they've got an opportunity to be heard. You're seen to respond to it, and then you take it out of a public forum and into a private discussion forum, whether that's, I'll give you a call, please privately send me your phone number, or I'm going to give you my email address and please connect with me that way, or whatever it is. But I think it's important to have the opportunity there, and whether or not, especially for small businesses, you think you have a customer service channel on social media, you already do, because people will use your Twitter handle or your Facebook page to ask you customer service type questions. So you just need to be prepared for that, and ready to respond to them, as Guy said, quickly and brilliantly.
Okay, and Tamsin, is there anything you could say about sort of how small businesses can manage that internally? So obviously, do they need somebody dedicated to that? How could they possibly structure their day to take that into account?
No, you don't need someone dedicated to it unless you're getting a lot of inquiries. Especially, I deal with one-person businesses all the time, and they might only have, say, one Twitter account for their whole business, and that might be also their personal account as well, and that's okay if you can manage that appropriately. It's just a case of being aware and remembering to check it. So you might have Twitter notifications for any mentions that you get come up on your phone, or you might keep social dashboard like Hootsuite or Marketing Suite open in your window when you're going about your day job. Just as long as you get the message, then you can respond with it in the appropriate way.
Great, thanks, Tamsin. And just to let everyone know, we are, if you want to sort of join the conversation on Twitter as well, the hashtag is hashtag ReachFTC. So we've got another quite practical question, and this is probably going to go to you for this, Dan. So what do you think of JournoLink as a PR medium for getting a story out to market? And I don't know if you want to go into maybe some of the other tools that we use, such as ResponseLink and things like that.
Yeah, I wonder whether that's a bit of PR from JournoLink, because I know JournoLink, so I'm not JournoLink for getting in PR for yourself. So yeah, JournoLink, as they've raised it, is a relatively new tool that allows journalists to directly talk to small business owners if they're looking for sort of comment on stories or profiles. Now, traditionally, there's a lot of big players in the space, so there's ResponseSource, Gorkana, which are actually quite pricey, and it tends to be the bigger agencies that basically sign up to those. They get their clients on them, and then a journalist can log in for free, say, I'm looking for a business owner that's exported to the States, for instance, and then the agency can respond to that journalist and potentially get coverage. Now, those services are probably out of the budget for most small businesses, but JournoLink is a new player in the market, and their USP is that small businesses themselves can sign up to the service, and it's not for PR agencies. So it's early days for JournoLink, but I've used it a couple of times, and I have found some quite interesting businesses through it, because journalists ultimately are quite lazy people. So any tool that Chris might not agree, I don't know, but any tool can allow us to sort of to get to a target market quickly in that way, and to get a response back that's on message sort of works. So I'd say that JournoLink is worth looking at for small businesses that don't have a PR agency. I think they have an element that's free, and then there's an element that you can pay for, but it is cheaper than the other players. But again, it comes back to what we spoke about earlier. It's being everywhere. Don't focus your PR strategy on one particular website or one particular tool. You can do a lot yourself, so you can be on Twitter. There's a very popular hashtag that journos use called JournoRequest. some journalists don't like it, others do, but me and Chris use it, and we get, you get a lot of spam, but equally you find some really interesting businesses. So it's just monitoring everything. But of course, you also need to be running a business. So don't be on social and PR all the time. You've got to be out there actually talking to customers as well at some point in the day.
Great, thanks, Dan. And just to add to that as well, I think if you're targeting a particular publication, so whether that's a trade publication that's in your niche or something more like ours, a general business publication, it's definitely worth following the journalists that write for that, because we'll often do call outs, as Dan says, on Twitter, looking for very specific types of businesses or very specific challenges that they're facing. So yeah, do follow the journalists that write for your targets. And kind of a nice question that we've got in that follows on from what Dan was saying there about sort of running a business and pipelines. This came in from Maud, and she says, we spend most of our time focusing on identifying new opportunities to build our sales pipeline. However, I understand the importance of customer retention. What tips can you give to get existing clients to re-engage? And if we could go to Guy for that.
Yeah, I think that's probably meat and drink for us, and it's a brilliant question, isn't it? It sums up for a business. Do you find it easy to win lots of new customers, or would you find it actually easier to get more business from your existing customers? And in my experience, it's so much easier to sell to an existing customer. But of course, you've got to earn that. You've got to make them. This is all about sales, but it's not about the sharpest sales message or the most carpet bombing people with marketing. It's how do you make people want to buy from you, and which in the initial case, I guess, is more about sales and marketing. But once they're bought from you, they've tasted what you like to do business with. So how do you make them want to keep coming back? How do you make them want to recommend you to their friends and colleagues? And how, when it's a discretionary spend, an offer or something, how do you loosen the purse strings? And in our experience and the experience of all our customers, it's about making sure you understand what's important to them. And it'll be different things for different people, just the same way you win a customer by understanding their needs and meeting those needs. Keeping them and meeting their expectations and needs is done one by one. And customer feedback is vital for that, because for me, the hot buttons might be speed of response. For somebody else, it might be the quality of the advice that they're able to get because they're not familiar with the product area or whatever. So I see feedback as not an optional extra for a business once you've got everything else up and running. For me, it's absolutely the key to customer retention, and understanding those little things that make people absolutely rave about you, because you're doing the big things well and you're doing the little things well, and you're a great customer, great company that they want to buy from.
I love that, Guy. I think one of the really important things that you just mentioned there was an issue of terminology. The question is about how do you re-engage customers, but you talk about customer retention, and I think that's really important. I think a lot of small businesses sort of, they get a new customer and they serve the customer as well as they can, because I think genuinely most small businesses are trying to do a great job and trying to really give good value to the people that they serve, and then they kind of forget about that person because they're on to the next person. And we always talk about building an engagement flow. So maybe that first step is asking them for their feedback. Maybe it's checking in with them after a week. Maybe it's letting them know how to use their product better. Maybe it's offering them some kind of add-on service. There's so many different things that you can do, but it's, I think the very best way that you can do it is to make that process continuous. And we have a statistic that we use, which I can't remember the source of right now, but I can look it up if anyone wants to know, that says that repeat customers spend on average 67% more than a new customer. And I'm sure most of us have done this as well. If we're looking at a new supplier, whether a service or a product, often we'll make a small purchase and kind of try them out. But once you have used that business, you come to know, like, and trust them if they've done a great job, and then you're much more confident with spending more money with them as time goes on. And I know I certainly have done that.
Great, thanks for the ad there, Tamsin. Is there anything you want to weigh in there, Dan?
No, I think it's all been covered.
Okay, great. It's a very practical question about Twitter use now. So this comes from Peter at AK Paving. And he says, I like the idea of using Twitter, but don't want to bore my followers with continuous pictures of similar patios. How can I keep my tweets fresh and interesting? So, Tamsin, if maybe you could kick off with that one.
I tell you what, actually, it's Peter, isn't it, that the questions come from?
Yeah.
Peter, I think you may be a comedy gem in the making. Why not share a slab of the day? It could be your hashtag, and it could be a brick or a tile or a slab. I think, have some fun with it as a starting point, and that would be something, because I think, especially because you're a brand that's associated with a leisure activity, I think people would quite warm to that. There's a reason that you'll probably notice more adverts on TV these days have a little bit of a comedy vibe to them. Some of them failing miserably, of course, but some of them doing quite well. So I would say, first of all, go ahead with that. But I think the other thing is, that you have so much that you could offer for a relatively kind of what people think of as a simple service. You can talk about maintenance for patios. You can talk about, like, you could even share kind of like fancy garden furniture that makes your patio look great. Like, think of all the kind of the associated things that you could offer. You could share like happy customer faces. So, Mrs. B sat on her new patio having a glass of wine, and that's a great image that people would love, because they're not from you. They are not buying a bunch of bricks that are laid out pretty in the garden with a decent foundation to them. What they're buying is extra outdoor space. So you can share with them how they can use that, how they can maintain it, and also give them that little sort of aspirational hit to it as well. So they see people who have already done that, and it's great. I think, like outdoor living should be a key topic for you. And then also things like sharing, maybe you take a vine that is actually of you guys building one of your patios. I think most people think that putting in a patio is a really simple operation. I used to work in construction, so I know that it's not like that. I know that you have to dig it out properly. I know that you've got to get you've got to level all the ground. I know that you've got to get all the stuff underneath, your core and your sand and your concrete and all of that. And actually, a Vine video of that process, I think, would add a lot of value, perceived value, to what it is that you offer, because it's much more than, saying getting Uncle Dave round, and who puts down a patio, and then after it rains for the first time, it sinks into your garden. You offer something that's much better than that.
Great, thanks for that, Tamsin. Dan, I thought it might be interesting if you could maybe grab just one example from your sort of decade of covering these businesses that you thought was a fantastic way to promote an offering that might not naturally seem like a fit for social media.
Yeah, I'm going to use an example that Tamsin will know well. It wouldn't be a social media talk without mentioning what's it called? Make It Blend, the Blender videos.
Yes.
Some people may not know, but it does fit. It does fit very well with this sort of industry. So Make It Blend is a blending company. Obviously, blenders are quite boring. There's not a lot you could really initially think to say about blenders. But what the blending company does is they've come up with this sort of character. He's like a sort of scientist, this sort of crazy chap who tries to blend anything and everything in a blender. So he blends like iPhone phones and Android phones and see which ones blend the quickest. And he's put sort of all sorts of equipment inside these blenders. And the videos, are massive, and they're all, they're huge on YouTube. And I think when they first started, it was probably quite cheap and quite poorly produced. But now I think it's now a bit of a machine. They've probably got a marketing agency on it. And yeah, it's just thinking about your brand in a different way, because like Tamsin said, you're not selling the paving slabs, you're selling the experience that the paving slabs create, and the blending company is selling the experience that the blender creates, like making smoothies on a warm summer day and all of that. So there's lots and lots of examples of B2B brands out there that actually use social really, really well, and it's just thinking, and usually it involves adding humour to it, and nowadays you can do it quite cheap. And what Tamsin was saying about the Vine, like iPhones and other phones are available, have a time-lapse function on the cameras nowadays, so you could do a sort of set up an iPhone and for 2 hours and record the laying of the slabs and then speed it up and stick it on YouTube. It's all that kind of stuff works. But yeah, for a B2B example, I'd look at Make It Blend. It's really on YouTube, but I'm sure you can find it on Twitter as well.
Yeah, the Will It Blend campaign is amazing. I mean, I think one time they did a car, and literally they turned the car into dust. They're the most amazing blenders in the world. It's incredible.
Perfect, great example there, Dan. And just a reminder there, if you do want to tweet and join the conversation on Twitter, the hashtag is ReachFTC. Or if you have any questions, you can use the Cover It Live send questions or comment box at the top right-hand corner of the page. We had a sales and sort of customer service related question, which I'm going to put over to Guy. And it's about, the question itself is how do you go about shaping questions for the feedback? And how should you measure what the sales team's doing? So I think, Guy, if maybe you could talk a bit about sort of how to track customer insight and feedback, and how you can kind of keep an eye on that sales process.
Yeah, sure. Questions to ask. Again, my mantra is always flip it round and say what's important to the customer. The danger with customer feedback is you start with the business and saying, what do we want to know to improve our business? This is why when you check out a hotel, they ask about the check-in process, the room, the landing, the cleaning, the bathroom, the bar, the restaurant, the gym, and you have to go through 53 pages of questions, literally in one case I received, and that's just stupid. The important thing for a hotel, for example, to the person staying there will typically be something like, were the people efficient and friendly? Was the room clean? Was the food and drink nice? Was check-in, check-out fast? That's pretty much all that's important to you when you stay in a hotel. And anything else, well, put a comment box at the bottom. So I would say make it easy and fast for the people to give feedback. So make the list of questions short. Make them about things that are important to your customer, not things that you want to know. Because you will only get a benefit if your customer, if their life is made better. And if, as Tamsin said earlier, that you're one of those businesses, the majority of business that are doing a great job for customers and do care, and you are working really hard for it, then you probably already have a good relationship with your customers. You've got to give them permission to be honest about the little things. So give permission to make the questions relevant, make them short and fast, and give them permission. And most importantly, if somebody has invested the time to give you feedback, follow up on it straight away, every time. So don't put the results in a spreadsheet of the top most important thing. Yeah, by all means do analysis, but first and foremost, get somebody on the case straight away as soon as feedback comes in, because that's how you save customers and create fans. Just blow their socks off. In terms of sales teams, you can, and many of our customers do, measure the performance of individuals as a way of doing appraisals or getting feedback on individuals and making sure everybody's performing well and performing in the customer's interests. So by all means do that, but just be wary of putting the whole customer experience on one person's head. Because actually, in any company, everybody has an impact on the customer. From the accounts department, the HR department, for interviewees, everybody can impact your reputation by how they do their job. So you just have to be, culturally, you just have to be very careful about pinning too much on one person when you're looking at customer satisfaction, because sometimes it's the salesperson's fault if something goes wrong. sometimes it's somebody else's fault, and sometimes it could be the weather. So yeah, keep it short, keep it fast, use the numbers intelligently, and have regard to the culture in the company that you want it to be a positive, constructive thing that helps customers, so that everybody does well, not a rod for beating people with.
Guy, could I ask you a question? Is that all right, Chris?
Yeah, I saw you nodding on the everybody has an impact point. So yeah.
Well, something. So, as an ex-small business owner myself, and I've always believed in that feedback process as being very, very important. How do you cope with not being oversensitive? And I mean that not in the context, because I think most people are fairly reasonable, and they don't go, oh, it's all the customer's fault. But there's always going to be, or there will frequently be, one person who's an outlier in terms of that, the sort of statistical happiness, I guess, of your customers, who will want to have a real bitch and moan. And I remember when I was running my own business, it used to break my heart. I remember being in tears over it.
Yeah.
And I did get to the point of, and it was literally one comment, but it was a really unpleasant comment. And I was like, well, maybe I'll just throw it all in. And I know that because I meet small businesses who care so passionately about what they do. Like, what's the best way to deal with that? Because you want to make sure you address the issues in the right way as well.
Do you know, I wonder if this is perhaps the most common reason why people don't do things, because I have actually seen somebody took a trial of our product, and they ended up not using it. They had one comment like that, and they were in tears. They just didn't want the feedback. Now, in my experience, we see aggregated results, and the vast majority of people, the first reaction of people is, feedback, what's going to happen? But the vast majority, actually surprising, the people who care enough to do it and invite feedback, generally speaking, are the good guys. You wouldn't be asking for it if you didn't care. Mm-hmm. So actually, what you find, and we, across hundreds of companies around the world, we watched this pattern time and time again. Most of the feedback is actually good and positive, and probably better than you're expecting. That's the main thing you get. The second thing that happens is you get some surprises, some problems, not the sort you've been describing, but issues that you weren't aware of, but that you think, well, I'm glad I am aware of that because I can save the customer, and that's helped both of us. They don't have to find another supplier and all the hassle that involves, and I've got benefit of that, of retaining that customer. And then there's just that tiny, really, really small proportion. I don't know whether your experience was different. I suspect not, but a really small proportion of nutters, people who don't care what they say, they don't care the impact on, and they'll be like that. And actually, do you know what? I would rather that a competitor of mine had the privilege of that customer than I did. And you just have, my advice to your specific question is, just look at it rationally. It'll hit you in the pit of the stomach that somebody can be so beastly. Maybe there's an issue at the heart of it, but it certainly won't have merited that kind of response. And just keep it in proportion. Look at all the good comments. Take heart from how well you're doing for the normal people, and don't worry about the nutters. And it is a tiny proportion. Like I said before, this company, I run a big customer service team, and the proportion of just idiots, basically, was less than 1%. It's a tiny fraction, and have broad shoulders. Just sort of dust yourself down and move on, and remember and look at the good feedback.
There were so many great tweetables in that answer, Guy. The proportion of idiots is less than 1%. Hashtag customer service. Love it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks. Just to let everyone know, we will be kind of providing content after the Hangout, so chopping out the video, and just to give you some resources to check back in and look at the answers to some of the specific questions. The next one's come in from Deborah, and this is probably going to go to you, Dan. So it says, whilst training in February this year, a case study success was featured in the Mail on Sunday, You Magazine's health pages. However, my business wasn't even set up then. Are there ways to use the article to lead into future media coverage? So I guess it's about leveraging that PR that you have achieved and what you can kind of use that for in the future.
Definitely. So yeah, if you've had some national sort of newspaper coverage like that, I'd definitely sort of get it on your website and say, things like something like, you see a lot of, as featured in the Daily Mail, the Mail on Sunday. They're very, very recognisable brands, very recognisable logos, and again, it does add, like we're saying, like sort of we were talking about, like PR does sort of build trust. So if there's a recognisable media brand that your customers, if you're in a very consumer, what was the company again? What type of company was it? Sorry, Chris.
She didn't actually say, but I'd assume, given that it's
the health.
well, I was training in February, so I assume it's some kind of sort of personal trainer type service.
Yes. So she's in a very, very consumer market. Then a logo like the Daily Mail is going to be very recognisable. So I'd say use it on your website, and it's quite often that when contacting other journalists, it's quite common to say, we recently were really recently featured in the Daily Mail, if it's over national. But I'd say to that, the caveat is just be really, really careful, and this comes down to not sort of spamming every journalist with the same message. So, for instance, if you're targeting, the equivalent editor at the Express, say, which I suppose is a sort of close competitor to the Daily Mail, the fact you've been in the Daily Mail is probably going to put them off, because they're like, well, they got the story, we don't want to cover the same thing. But if you're potentially targeting the business press online, such as us at Business Zone, we're going to write more about the story behind your business rather than the actual product. We'd probably be quite interested to know that as a tiny little business, you've already had some coverage in the national press, which again endorses it. So it's all about using it appropriately, and it's where people fall down on PR is just putting together one email, spamming thousands of journalists, and we're all, although you on first sight you might think that we're all the same and all publications are the same. We're not. We're very different. We write content in very different ways. So you could get 10 bits of coverage in 10 publications about your business, and they'll all be completely different, and the journalists will focus on completely different things. So I'd say definitely really use the Daily Mail coverage to your advantage, but if you're trying to get other PR, just use it appropriately to the journalists that you're targeting.
Great, and sorry, Deborah did just comment and say she's a hypnotherapy service, but I assume that wouldn't change your answer at all, Dan.
No, hypnotherapist, the same answer applies. But we have covered, like I can recently think we featured a hypnotherapy company because we wrote an article about how entrepreneurs can manage stress and deal with work-life balance, and there was a hypnotherapist that actually had some sort of tips and advice for us. So obviously, the PR she got from us was probably very, very different to the PR that the Daily Mail would have focused on. So you see how you can sort of adapt your business, to the appropriate publication.
Great, yeah. Just to follow up on that as well, I think as a journalist, you're often looking for a sort of level of social proof when you work out whether you want to feature a business or an interviewee. So, you'd obviously check, do they have at least or have they established some kind of social following? I think if you've got news articles out there or features out there already about you, there's no reason not to put links on the site. I mean, I definitely recommend that, and use the magazine or the newspaper's logo, and that really just kind of helps us build up a sort of belief in your business. And I think that's especially true of SMEs, because there might not be you might not have filed with Companies House. We often can't check those figures, and we really are looking at what you've got out there, your personality, and using that and trying to build that social proof. So having those articles really helps in that, and therefore you can leverage it into other coverage. So we're going to skip back a bit here to the last question, but something came in from Colin James just saying, what does the panel think about customer surveys, and what is the best way to go about collecting the feedback? So I know we kind of covered that a little bit in the previous question, but I think maybe, Guy, if you could just say, if someone's at that very early startup stage, and they're doing this themselves. I mean, you mentioned kind of spreadsheets and the difficulties there. I mean, are there any kind of simple targets an early stage startup can set itself in terms of tracking customer service and getting that feedback?
Yeah, I think it's that early stage is a very important point, actually, because from the point of keeping those hard-won customers that you've worked so hard, I can't overstate the importance of doing it. I would say for somebody embarking, and you've got a million things to do when you're starting up a business, of course you have, but having some mechanism I would call it, rather than customer service, I would call it making it easy for customers to give you feedback. So perhaps even just finding a way of inviting them to give feedback after you've delivered a product to a service to them is the best way to get started. One of the main things I say to people is don't copy how big companies do it. You'd think as a small business that copying people who do it for a living and a specialist would be a good thing to do, but it's a terrible thing to do. Big companies send surveys that are too long. Nobody reads them. Even worse than that, nobody ever acts on them. They just go into a report somewhere and they have minimal impact on the person who's taken the trouble to give the feedback. If you want to get value from it, as I say, don't treat it as a survey. Treat it as an invitation for the customer to get a benefit by giving them an extra channel through which to communicate with you. One, as I said earlier, one that's fast, simple. You've invited feedback. Make it easy for them to tell you, because it's actually much easier for them to stay with you as a supplier. The evaluation, the risk of switching, nobody wants to, but actually, do you know what? It's particularly in this country, rather than have the awkward conversation, we would tend to go and find another supplier. So just make it easy. After you've delivered a product or service, if you don't want to use a package or you're not ready to use software like ours, just send an email saying, I'd like to check everything was okay. And you will find you get things that people won't say to your face. If you give them permission, if you say you want to hear it, you get the benefit because you get invaluable insights into what's important to each individual customer. And they'll appreciate the fact that you've made it easy for them to identify, perhaps the little things that would make your service not just good, but perfect for them. And as I say, it's about making people want to buy from you.
Thanks, Guy. So we've got a question in from Ingrid Marsh, founder of the Cater Club, who we met actually on one of our road trips as part of the pitch contest. It says, is it best to target PR and marketing efforts at the boss, the one who has to part with the cash, which in my case should be anything from office manager to facilities manager. So I think maybe if we start with Tamsin, and if you could just kind of say how you think about social and whether there's anybody you can kind of identify within an organization, how targeted should that be for business to business sales?
Yeah, it's a good question, and the answer is not direct. So what I mean by that is, in this specific situation, you've got somebody who needs the payment to be made. The person who will actually sign off on the amount of money that's going to be paid for their service is the boss. However, related to that, there is a decision maker. So say, like the example there was the office manager. They're your gatekeeper. They're the people that are actually going to say to the boss, here's the people that we're going to use, and then the boss will actually sign off. I don't think there's any harm in making sure that the boss knows who you are, but it's actually the decision maker that you want to target first of all. So what you need to work out is who is that. Then there's also going to be influencers around them as well. So that might be, I guess, a clearer example to use, because it could be all sorts of people. But say when you have those little stands at the end of the queue when you're going to pay at a supermarket, and they've got sweets on. Those are placed there for children. So the influencer is the child, the parent is the person that has to pay. And the parent is dying to get out of there, and the kid starts kicking up because they want a Mars bar or whatever. And that's why that happens. So you can think about any product in that way. So who are the people around them that are going to be influencers? I think when the danger is when you start thinking about it in those terms, like who do I target? It's often a kind of a very traditional sort of sales mindset. But if you're using social media and digital marketing, that's much more of an education play. You want to think about it as being a bit more cuddly, in terms of you're just getting to know someone and you're wanting to kind of pull them in towards you, rather than blasting out tweets that say, hey, office managers, here's a great deal for you on catering in #Hull or wherever you are. Okay, I wouldn't do it that way. So what I would look at is are there any specific groups or hashtags that are used by those people on social channels? So there might not be like an office manager hashtag, but there might be kind of, office life. And again, as Dan was saying, it can go back to the humour as well. So, maybe you can join in those conversations that are happening around office life and actually get your name in front of people and build up that kind of that know, like and trust factor that way. So yeah, that's kind of long-winded, indirect answer, but I hope the point was made, maybe.
That's a brilliant answer there, Tamsin. Thank you.
Okay.
Dan, I'm just wondering, because obviously we do a lot of business profiles and work with a lot of startups. So I just wondered, Dan, if you had any examples of where you've seen that kind of conversation going on and very targeted at specific people, or if you could think of anyone that's doing that quite well at the moment. So sorry to put you on the spot there. But...
Oh, you're hitting me with all the specific examples, Chris. I don't remember this when we spoke before. I mean, in terms of the hashtags that Tamsin talks about, there's lots of like if you're sort of going local, there's lots of local hour hashtags. So if you search, you'll find lots. So in Bristol, there's like Brizzle Hour, and there's a sort of Twitter chat that focuses around the Bristol area. Bristol's where we're based, but by the way. So I think it's on Mondays at 8 o'clock. So between 8 and 9, there's conversations that happen around sort of Bristol stuff. It can descend into a bit of a, people posting loads of ads. So you've got to be like careful that it's not just about that. It's about a conversation. So that's, I can't think of a specific business on the fly that's doing it, but I'd look into sort of local hashtags. And obviously, in terms of sort of what Tamsin was saying about finding influencers, obviously, LinkedIn is your friend. When it comes to the B2B space, so you can spy on LinkedIn. Although always remember, if you've got the thing switched on, people can see that you've done it. But it's good to sort of find people on LinkedIn. You can look at their bios, work out what role they have, and then see who they're linked to, and obviously through that you can maybe work out who the sort of decision maker is, but who the influencers are in the business. So in the B2B space, LinkedIn is probably, for this particular person, is particularly useful. And again, on LinkedIn, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of very, very niche groups that talk about specific industries or specific things. So there might be sort of an office, like Tamsin said, an office manager kind of group where people talk about, how do you source, great furniture, chairs, stationery, that kind of stuff. So, this person that's asked a question maybe wants to focus quite a bit of their social media strategy, potentially, on LinkedIn, because that's where most of the B2B kind of conversations happen.
Perfect, Dan. Thanks for taking that question on the fly there. So we're sort of running short on time, but we had a quick question come in about Google AdWords. So Tamsin, I don't know if you wanted maybe just to give us, when you think of that very early stage startup or small business, how viable do you think they are and how useful do you think they are?
Very. Is that enough?
That's definitely a quick answer. Any indicators maybe that
Yes.
people could...
So I love Google AdWords. I love pay-per-click advertising generally. I'm not a genius at it myself, but it really, really works, because what happens is that you only pay when people actually do something. And for those of us on a tight budget, when we're just starting up, that's a great thing to do. It also really helps when you're just building your SEO, for example, because your website's very new and you don't have a lot of great, unique content on it that's been crawled and indexed and all that kind of thing. So pay-per-click is great, and it kind of goes back to some of the stuff that we were talking about with paid advertising on social media as well. It is worth taking a few quid, 20 quid, 50 quid, and with Google AdWords there's a lot of free get started £50 vouchers or £25 vouchers out there. The likelihood is you would be able to find one, and giving it a go. But what I would strongly recommend is that you get some help to do that. I think of Google AdWords and pay-per-click marketing in general like skiing. This week, for some reason, I'm doing loads of weird analogies. Bear with me. This one works. So it's like skiing, because anybody can start skiing and get down the hill, right? Whether it's your first day on the slope, you can get down there. However, it might take you a hell of a long time. You might fall over a lot, and it could be very, very messy, and you might break your leg. However, an expert, somebody who's much better at it, can get down much smoother, much quicker, more effectively, less out of breath, and be straight into the bar at the end, right? So what you want to do is you want to find your downhill skiing pro for Google AdWords. And there are loads of them out there that are set up specifically to help small business owners. And it's worth paying for to get some of that help. And the ones that I've met and I've worked with in the past, they don't actually charge a lot of money. And based on, based on the kind of cash that you're wanting to spend with them. So let's say maybe you decide that you're going to spend, you have a £200 budget in total. They might charge you 50 quid to manage that, and then they spend 150 on the advertising. But because they know what they're doing, they're going to get a hell of a lot more out of the £150 than you are if you do it on your own and you're trying to make your way down the hill, hitting all the trees on the way. So I hope that analogy makes sense.
Can I comment? Can I comment, Chris?
Yeah.
Yeah, please weigh in, Guy.
Yeah, I think Tamsin's point about it's targeted, and you know, compared to what we were saying earlier about the social media and the PR, which is not targeted. There's great value in something that's targeted. Our experience of Google AdWords has been a little bit different. We don't use them. It's not that there's no value, it's just it didn't work for us. And we did get help we used in C who didn't know what they were doing and took a lot of money. So there are bear traps out of there. And then we found a guy, like a Romanian rocket science, who certainly did know what he was doing, but he just couldn't make it work for us. And after 3 months, he came back, and yet had done for another company in another software company, not in our space. But he said, look, your circumstances, the words we're going for, they just won't work for you. So, people do get results. There's no question about they can get results, but also consider Facebook advertising. If you're B2C, then Facebook advertising can be a good alternative. LinkedIn, if you're B2B, then LinkedIn can be very, very targeted, and again, on the you only pay when you get results, pay-per-click type thing, LinkedIn advertising. And if you don't do any of those, none of those work for you. The thing that we do, that because none of those have been as successful for us, is organic. If you write knowledgeably about issues that are important to your customers, then you do go up the organic listings, and that's free. It takes time, it takes work, but it doesn't actually take much money. So that's just another alternative in the mix, which might work for some people, and that's for us. That's been the most successful.
I think that's very, very valid. And just one thing that I would say is that whatever you want to do, somehow you pay for it, and it's whether you pay in time or money, and and you just have to balance that for your business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Do you want to add anything, Dan?
And my experience in sort of the Google AdWords areas is very limited, but I'd echo what Tamsin said. It is worth paying for, but there are a lot of people out there that don't know what they're talking about. And if I can get a bit of a plug in, we also run a site called ukbusinessforums.co.uk, and that has an online marketing section, and there's lots and lots of debate and people on there that talk about the value things like Google AdWords, and there's some great consultants on there, who you can sort of make connections with, who offer some sort of free advice. But like everything, it's like you got to just do your research, get testimonials, make sure you're covering yourself. But I think Google AdWords is an area where it probably is a place where you should get paid expert advice to sort of maximize it, really.
It's like anything. I think you have to test it. If you can test it, and it will fail if you don't take Tamsin's advice and get good quality advice and somebody who knows you, it will fail. Whereas it could have succeeded maybe if you've done it right. But if you give it a fair crack of the whip, it may work, it may not, and something else. Maybe we all know there is no silver bullet that's one size fits all that work for everybody. Otherwise, everybody would be doing the same thing.
Yep.
True.
Great. Anything anyone wants to add on that last question?
No, I'm good.
No, great. Okay, so thanks for watching, everyone. We've just drawn up to an hour there. So that was the live Q&A on PR, sales, and social media masterclass in association with Xero. And as I mentioned at the start of the call, that was part of our whole Reach for the Clouds campaign. And if you go on the site, and the URL, which is BusinessZone.co.uk /Xero, spelt with an X, clouds, but I will post that on Twitter in a moment if you didn't catch it. You can see lots of case studies and the different businesses that went through the challenge and were helped by Guy and Tasman to kind of build those different areas of their business. So lots of good content on there, and I'll make sure that we have clips and sort of highlights from the Hangout available hopefully as early as tomorrow morning, and so you can kind of go back and revisit any areas that you didn't quite catch. So again, thanks to all the panelists for taking part, and thanks for watching at home.
Cheers all. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.